Hey, good Tuesday morning, everybody. Welcome into the Volquest podcast. I am Eric Kane alongside Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, and Austin Price. Appreciate you guys for being here, and a big thanks to Exterior Home Solutions for making this podcast possible. If you need roofing, siding, windows, or a garage, contact Exterior Home Solutions today. They've been local and trusted since 1999. That's good, folks, at Exterior Home Solutions, 865-524-5888. Give that phone number a call for a free estimate if you have the need for some home renovations and upgrades. All right, guys, coming into a Kentucky week, but first we'll look back at the Alabama game, third Saturday in October. It was a really good first half for Tennessee. It was a really bad second half for Tennessee. Lo and behold, Tennessee loses 34-20. Falls to 5-2, 2-2 on the season. Austin Price, a frustrating night for all involved, especially when you look at that first half and Tennessee was in control and quite frankly dominant at points and times.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Frustrating is the best way to describe it, because if you're a Tennessee fan, if you're a Tennessee coach, Tennessee player, you had Alabama on the hook and you let them off. And to have a halftime lead against Alabama, I think it's since Philip was fired, I think the only times it's happened were last year and this year. And you had a real shot down there to win for the first time since 2003, Brent, and second half was a lot to be desired.
Yeah, I mean, you missed opportunities in the first half, Rob Lewis, to have a bigger lead, and then you weren't ready to play to start the third quarter. You had two defensive breakdowns, bust, whatever you want to call them, and then the third quarter just snowballed on you. And I think that's moving forward. The concern is how do you avoid that happening to you again, because it's happened to you twice now that two road games have gotten away from you in 15 minutes because you let a couple things snowball on you. But don't overlook the fact that Tennessee let Alabama off the hook in the first quarter by not being able to close out in the red zone.
Yeah, I know. And Hubbard, as it was happening, both those times, first down, and they didn't get. I was just picturing your facial expression. You talked about it all week long, and been one of your point of emphasis on podcast, and 10 things I think. Tennessee's red zone numbers, what they have been, in regards to finishing with touchdowns since the Virginia game, and it was just it unfolded, right in front of you. But even with that, the way they opened the first half with a touchdown drive, they closed the first half with a touchdown drive. Even with those hiccups, it still felt like they had the momentum for about two plays in the third quarter, and then it was just after that first Alabama drive. I don't think there's a Tennessee fan on the planet that's surprised about what happened in the third quarter.
I think there's a lot of reasons why Tennessee lost this game, but obviously kind of focus on the positives here to begin this podcast. Love the way they came out and attacked Joe Milton, or attacked with Joe Milton's legs. Of course, the third down that he picked up on the opening drive, I mean, that was him. He was flushed out of the pocket. He ran to the sticks, ran over a guy. I thought that was really, really good to see on the opening drive, considering he kind of did the complete opposite the first series against Texas A&M. But they made it a focal point to use his legs to try to make up for some yardage. But even throwing the football, started 9-9. That opening drive, he was 5 for 5, 65 yards. And that touchdown pass to Squirrel White, Brent, beautiful ball, beautiful catch, and you couldn't script a better start for Tennessee. But again, it's like you couldn't script a better start for Tennessee in the swamp either.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and Elijah Simmons talked about it on Monday. It's about finishing. I mean, you got to play the full 60 minutes, and Tennessee got off to a great start. And Joe Milton played really well in the first half. The receivers got open. I mean, everything was going the way it was supposed to go in the first half. And then, in the third quarter, you lost momentum. You got backed up on a fluky thing that happened, and a call that you don't ever hardly see. Well, you never see it. Let's be honest with it, on the fair catch deal. And then all of a sudden, one becomes two, becomes four, becomes eight, and the game's just out of control. But it was a great start for Tennessee. I mean, again, Joe Milton missed a throw to Jacob Warren. But he may come back and made a really nice throw to Castles there on the touchdown to close out the half. Squirrel makes a great catch. Tennessee did a lot of things well early on. They just got to learn to play a full game, and they've got to learn to kind of move on to the next play when something bad happens. I don't think the defense recovered, Rob, from the two snaps. I think they were on their heels, and it took them – I don't know if they got their footing back in the second half at all, because after those two plays, it was like, Superman had taken off his cape, so to speak. And not that they were Superman in the first half, but it was it was a real, like almost a reality check for them, which shouldn't have been. They just didn't handle it very well after those 2 plays.
No, but they also didn't get any help from the offense. I'm not talking about a scoring drive, just stringing together 2 or 3 first downs where you could go get to the sideline, regroup. Here, what are you seeing? Here's what went wrong. You go from those 2 plays immediately to the whatever the botched miscommunication. Fair catch signal. You're starting on the 4. You're 3 and out. But another kind of longish drive for the field goal. Suddenly it's a 20-17 game, and just again, I agree with you, Hubbard. The defense did not recover, but the offense didn't give them any breathing room either. It didn't give them a chance.
You guys have both brought up that fair catch. Was it a fair catch? Was it not a fair catch? 2 times there in that brief couple of minutes. Josh Heupel was asked about that on Monday for further clarity. And kind of what would happen, because of course that was a huge point in the football game. They went down, scored on those 2 plays to begin the third quarter, and then you're backed up at the 4 when you should be at the 20 plus. Here's what Josh Heupel had to say about that sequence, the fair catch, non-fair catch there in the third quarter.
Well, I mean, letter of the law, anybody puts their hand up above the shoulder, that would signify a fair catch. We had a frontline guy that put his pointer finger up slightly above his shoulder.
Is he coached to do that, just to say that?
No, he's not coached to do that, no.
Obviously, none of us probably saw that in real time. I didn't get to see it. I didn't really see it on the replay. Somebody screen grabbed it, and I've seen it on a Monday. And Josh Heupel just kind of says, no matter what happens, if you have your hand go above your shoulder, that's a fair catch. I mean, Brent, have you seen anything like that? I mean, obviously he's not calling a fair catch. It's one of the many questionable calls in that football game. Have you ever seen anything like that? I mean, it was a deflating moment for Tennessee.
Well, no, I haven't. I mean, and I'm not sure what that an official is looking for that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you got a lot of things to look for on that play. That's an interesting one to look for when you've got 11 guys out there. Is everybody on sides? Is the 2 guys in the back signaling for a fair catch? If it's a sky kick, is it an up guy signaling for a fair catch? I don't think anybody on the front line has ever signaled for a fair catch before, or at least I haven't seen it. So, it's an unusual play. I think that this is an off-season discussion based on what happened Austin in that Iowa-Minnesota game and what happened in the Tennessee game. This is an off-season discussion on how are you going to define what a fair catch is? Because the letter of the law in the rule book, as I've read it, says you have to wave your arm. You have to make a gesture with your arm to signal a fair catch, not pointing with your hand above your shoulder or, something to that effect. I think that's something that has to be looked at and has to be discussed in the offseason based on the impact that we've seen those 2 calls this week.
Yeah, I mean, again, by the letter of the law, sure, I guess, they're justified in making the call. Again, to me, there's always common sense that kicks in. And if you're that referee, common sense should have said the guy that's 30 yards away from the kick isn't calling for the fair catch. He pointed at the sky or whatever he pointed at. But
shouldn't
again,
have done it to begin with, but still, again,
very. And I would tell you, if this had happened to Alabama, I would tell you the same thing. If Tennessee, if this had happened and Alabama fans were upset because it had happened to them, I would tell you that Alabama, in some ways, kind of got robbed of the moment because, again, I think common sense has to kick in. Common sense should have kicked in with that official, but it obviously didn't. And, again, being very black and white, to me, there's always a shade of gray on things. And, it kind of is what it is. But, I mean, I think Hubs is right. I think it's something you have to address in the offseason because, it definitely hampered Tennessee having to start from the 4-yard line, right? I mean, they went 3 run plays, punted it away, and, got Alabama more points because of a short field.
Yeah, one of the many questionable things calls in that football game, and there's been a lot of talk about the officiating first of the week, and again, I think we've all pretty much said, Austin said it a lot after the game, Brent wrote about it, I've written about it, we've talked about it, Rob, I'm sure you've written about it. I mean, the officiating was bad. I mean, point blank, it was bad. It's been bad in college football this year, and that can affect the ebbs and flows of a football game. But Rob, I mean, Tennessee didn't score a point in the second half. Tennessee was outscored 27-0. It was just a disastrous final 2 quarters, and absolutely a missed call here and there could have changed the difference. I mean, Tyler Barron was absolutely choke slammed on that touchdown pass at the beginning of the third quarter. Should have been called. It wasn't called. Tennessee did a lot to lose this game, where it did so much to win it in the first half. It felt like.
Yeah, I totally get where everybody's coming from with the officiating.
I mean, I do too. I get it.
And to me, it's not so much the 8 Tennessee was called for; it's the 1, for 5 yards that Alabama was called for. And again, Tennessee left it. They left themselves open to to get victimized by that, by just melting down in the third quarter. But there were so many opportunities there that I just can't say cut and dry, black and white, the officials lost that game. But yeah, I mean, I get where fans are coming from 100%. I mean, it's pretty egregious when you look at the difference there. But the bottom line is you got shut out in the second half. You picked up 1 first down in the entire third quarter, and you had all the momentum. So I can't just say it's the officials. Tennessee missed an opportunity. You're not going to be up 20-7 in that building very often. At halftime, and it wasn't a fluky 20-7. Man, you had taken it to Alabama in the first half, and you forced 2 turnovers. You held Alabama to 130 yards of total offense, and really just one drive where the offense looked cohesive. I mean, Tennessee was clicking, and just lost the thread at the half. I mean, they're gonna be kicking themselves for that one for a long time.
Yeah. Sorry, AP. The irony of the Alabama penalty too, the one penalty is it shouldn't have been a penalty. The center snapped it, which is legal. Everybody else didn't go. It wasn't like everybody else went before the center. The center just snapped, before everybody else decided to go. It's not an illegal. So he didn't double clutch it. It's not an illegal snap. It looked odd because one guy went and not everybody else did. But the guy who went was the guy who's in control of the football. So the irony of it is they should not have had a penalty at all in the game, Austin, based on that fact. And listen, you got to flush it. I think the frustration for everybody in regards to officiating is just a lack of transparency on anything and everything. I mean, I don't think it should be on the losing coach on Monday to have to explain the rule on the fair catch. I think that should have been explained by an officiating, by somebody in officiating, in charge of officiating, not an expert who's got a microphone on a TV as a rules expert. I mean, by someone with authority, explain that one to the fans and to everybody out there, and not make a head coach respond to it on Monday after he's gotten whatever clarity he gets. I don't think that's the head coach's job. That should be the head of officials' job to explain on Monday.
The conference makes way too much money. Everybody, the commissioner, all the underlings, the schools, everybody makes too much money to not have transparency and accountability. Again, there's going to be missed calls. Some of them are pure judgment calls. That goes on, and it goes on in Tennessee's favor. It goes on against Tennessee. And that way for every school. But again, the lack of transparency and accountability is probably what really drives the conspiracies, what drives the thought process. And it's not just like that in football. I mean, how many times have you heard rupparees and Kentucky gets the whistle and all that in basketball? I mean, same thing there. I mean, it goes on across the board, and it's not just the SEC. It goes on in every conference. But again, the fact that nobody sits there and walks you through it, again, as Josh Heupel explained, is that the rule? Sure. Should it have been called? No, because people should have common sense. But I mean, again, it's not like that Cam Selden was back there, doing it or pointing to the sky or whatever. I mean, this was talking about the guy 30 yards away. But again, neither here nor there. You got to move on from it, because at the end of the day, Tennessee's got a Kentucky team that's capable. But in my opinion, what Kentucky does well, Tennessee does well defensively and stopping. So I think this is not a great matchup for Kentucky, but they are coming off a bye week, and Tennessee's coming off 2 really physical football games.
Yeah, I think the lack of transparency was what gets everybody frustrated. And I mean, that's not going to change here in midseason. it just kind of is what it is, and it's
It hadn't changed in 4 decades.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, everybody's saying, well, what's Sankey say about this? Sankey's not asked these questions, guys. I mean, it's just, and he's not going to be asked these questions in front of a public setting. Just is what it is. Rob Lewis, Joe Milton, really good first half. Of course, Joe Milton, not a very good second half. Tennessee, very bad second half. Offense, defense, everybody involved. What did you like about Joe Milton's game and kind of how he really took over the football game there in the first half, throwing the football and, of course, running the football?
I mean, I thought he was decisive. I mean, and I would also, guess that Heupel helped him out with the play calling there in the first half. I mean, it really looked like Joe was just knew where he wanted to go. Was not hesitant. Didn't hold on to the ball, and we've all talked about it. Loved the way he was a willing and capable runner. I don't expect him to lower his shoulder every time 15 times a game. No, he shouldn't. But to have that element in the holster, I thought that was good to see, and I just thought he was I've used it before, decisive, and I don't mean just throwing the football. I mean pulling it down a couple times and just deciding he was going to run with the ball. Whereas at times I think we've seen him be hesitant. Am I buying time to throw, or am I just getting out of the pocket to run? I thought a couple of instances he made quick decisions when he was going to run and got positive yardage. But the biggest takeaway in the first half is he just seemed to know where he wanted to go with the football. He was quick about it, and was largely accurate. For the most part.
Brent, I thought arguably his best throw of the day, either this one or Squirrel. One was down the field, one was 6 yards or whatever. Right before the half, it was a drive where, man, you get stuffed on fourth down. We can talk about those decisions here in a moment. Your defense bails you out with a really nice, interception in the end zone. Great defensive play. You drive down the length of the field, a little less than 3 minutes, less than 15 seconds on the clock in that first half. You're 3rd and goal from the 6 or whatever, and you got man coverage. It's a rub route, and Milton's blitz, and he throws a beautiful ball to a spot from McCown Castles. I thought that was a gorgeous throw, and that was a huge touchdown right before the half, giving, again, Tennessee the momentum and a bigger lead, 20-7, heading into the break.
Well, we talk about situational awareness, right? And coming out of the Texas A&M game, we talked a lot about Joe's lack of situational awareness, running out of bounds short of the sticks, not taking advantage or taking a shot when you got a free play. The situational awareness that he had on that play, now it was a timeout, so he was reminded of it. I'm sure he put the headsets on. I saw him talking to Joey Halsley upstairs before that play. But to understand, you're probably going to get 0 here, right? You're going to get an all-out blitz. You cannot take a sack, okay? I mean, you've got to get the ball out of your hands. You cannot do anything to take a sack, and the ball's got to be in a place where there's only your guy's going to catch it, or you're going to kick a field goal. That's a really nice play, because that's what a veteran quarterback's supposed to do, right? That's the situational awareness that you're looking for, which I thought was good for Joe. I didn't think Joe was as bad in the second half as some other people seem to think that he was. I thought Tennessee's receivers were bad in the second half. I didn't think Tennessee's receivers got open, on those comeback routes and some different things like that. I think Alabama mixed up some of their coverage stuff. I think they played more physical. Tennessee got behind the sticks, AP. They were more in 2nd and 8 instead of 2nd and 4. Or 2nd and 5, which changes your play calling. Joe's got to hold it a little bit longer in some of those instances. But I didn't think the receivers got open nearly as well in the second half as they did in the first half. I thought Alabama's physicality in the secondary, whether it was legal or not legal, showed up. And that's something Tennessee has to adjust to, because I promise you, everybody they play down the stretch here is going to try to beat them up on the outside as much as they can.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this weekend, I'm sure Mark Stoops will have his guys doing the same. The Abrams Drain kid at Missouri is a corner that continues to have success. Once a target here for wide receiver for Jeremy Pruitt, and he's having a really nice year as a DB at Missouri. And then Georgia's always going to play physical. So I mean, like, you're right, that's going to be something they have to encounter over the next 3 or 4 weeks, and so they're going to have to figure it out. But Tennessee's got to find a way to get separation with their wide receivers, and maybe it's through scheme, maybe it's through the receivers being a little more physical back, or who knows what. But I think that ultimately, they've got to do some things that are different, because the second half is probably going to be a blueprint for how they're defended the next month.
Rob, I think one of the biggest surprises for me in this football game, and you knew it wasn't going to be easy. I mean, it's never going to be easy to run the football on the road in the Southeastern Conference, especially against a defense like Alabama. I mean, Tennessee had the best rushing attack in the SEC, and just, without Joe Milton's legs and Joe Milton's running ability, where he gained 93 yards, he didn't net that much because of sacks. Tennessee was pretty much one-dimensional. Couldn't get anything going in the traditional run game from his trio of backs, and that's another contributing factor to, your second and eights, third and nines instead of third and fours, second and fives. Tennessee couldn't run the football in the traditional sense at Alabama.
Yeah, I was surprised at how they were bottled up, especially, given how good they were the week before against Texas A&M, which is, a salty defense in its own right. And but the biggest surprise to me was just Jalen Wright not able to find, and I don't put it all on Jalen. I mean, I don't think he was missing a lot of open running lanes, but he's been so good at the chunk plays. He had eight runs of 10 plus yards against Texas A&M alone, and then his long run on Saturday against Alabama was for 5 yards. And I thought that was really a key with how they were able to, just control Tennessee's offense. There weren't those 6, 7, 8, 9 yard, little burst in the run game that just continually, kept the chains moving, kept the tempo going, and to not see, Jalen be able to squirt out for a gain of longer than 5 yards all game long. You could have taken all the money I had if you wanted to bet me that Jalen's long run of the day was going to be for 5 yards in Tuscaloosa.
So Tennessee falls to Alabama. We'll have a little bit more on this game, and then looking ahead to Kentucky. What does Tennessee need to do better on the road, that environment, and how big is this game coming up in Lexington for the Volunteers? That and a whole lot more as the Volquest podcast continues. Do want to give a big thanks to Game Time for being a part of the show. You guys shouldn't have to worry at all about buying tickets to your next big event, whether it's theater, whether it's, of course, sporting events. I should lead off with that. Sporting events, UT football, UT basketball, baseball, lady balls, whatever the case may be, but also comedy in your area, theater in your area, shows. You can find those tickets with the Game Time app. It's the fast and easy way to buy all the tickets for things in your area. Plus, they've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views of your seats, and the best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you're going to expect when you arrive. Plus, they've got protection, job loss protection. They got cancellation protection and the lowest price guarantee. That's at the Game Time app. I encourage you today to go ahead and download the Game Time app, create an account, and when you create an account, use the promo code VOLS, VOLS, and you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, promo code VOLS, 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 for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Big thanks to Game Time, and as always, a big thanks to Exterior Home Solutions for making this podcast possible.
Your roof, it's the most important protection against nature for your home or your business. That's why I trust the experts at Exterior Home Solutions.
Thank you, as always, to Exterior Home Solutions, big friends of the program. They can be a friend to you today. 865-524-5888. A free estimate by calling that phone number today. Last thing on the Alabama game, then you got to flip the page. Tennessee's flipping the page. Got a big game coming up on the road to Kentucky. Still 5-2 on the season, 2-2 in SEC play. A lot to play for if you're the Volunteers. But we need to go back and discuss the decisions to go for it on fourth down. Obviously, a huge point in this football game. Was not successful. You went for it twice on fourth down on your own side of the 50. It did not translate into success. And Brent Hubbs, that's something Tennessee's really struggled at. Short yardage, especially 4th and 2 and short. You had a good note in your 10 things you think you learned. Tennessee's got to get better to have success in that area.
Well, if you're going to keep going for it on 4th and a yard and a half, 4th and 8 inches, whatever, if that's, you got to have something that works there. And whatever that is whatever that is. It's like people were talking about the Eagles on Sunday night going for it from their own 27-yard line, and they flash up the analytics, and this is what analytics say and all that stuff. I don't really understand, to me, all those things end up being a gut feel, but the Eagles go for it there because they're the best short yardage team in football. And Tennessee's not the best short yardage team in football. And I think that's something you have to take into account when you're making those decisions, unless you got some things up your sleeve that are different. But Austin, the tight formation and running it, into the interior of the line of scrimmage, thinking you're going to get a push there against the 9 or 10 man box, I think it's pretty evident that's not what Tennessee does best, and it's not worked this season.
Well, for me, like if you're going to go tight formation, don't you got to go with like the tight formation personnel? It's like they'll be like in their regular, spread stuff, and all of a sudden they bring Squirrel in, in top. I mean, like, what's he going to do?
Makes no sense.
Like what I mean? Like if you're going to put some, you're going to kind of go, pound it, then bring in some guys to pound it. I mean, don't have small tiny guys trying to help lead block in some of these instances. That's the part that is the head scratcher to me. Like, quit worrying about the tempo. If you're slowing it down to try to go for a 4th and 1 like this, get the first down and then substitute. Then you can get back into your tempo. Like the whole notion of, hey, we're gonna run this for a first down, then hop up and then we're gonna go. Just get the first down. Ultimately, that's what matters most. Hype said, they've been under center. Like, they've not really been under center this year. They went under center far more a year ago in these instances with Princeton Fant behind them and whoever else. That's just not been their, that's not been their modus operandi, this year as far as, these short yardage situations, whether it be 3rd or 4th down.
Yeah, the bunch stuff doesn't work. The thought process with not subbing is that prevents the defense from putting their goal line stuff in.
Sure.
Right? Now, here's the thing I would say to that. Because of the way offense football is played, aren't coaches adjusting to not having as many substitution packages as they had 4 or 5 years ago, right? I mean, you got to recruit guys. Your defensive line have to be able to rush the passer and hold up in the run game. Like, you just don't have the ability to, as a defensive guy, okay, we're going to bring in our 2 run stoppers on this run play. I mean, in college football, defensive guys are 3-down players. They're not a 1-down player or a 2-down player. So I don't think you get the advantage by jumping into that, preventing the defense to sub that maybe you once thought you did or did a few years ago before defenses adjusted to this stuff. I mean, I think defenses have caught up to some degree with tempo because they don't have as many sub packages to rotate in and out based on every situation.
Yeah, and even more simple than that, I just think, Tennessee going into that game was averaging 230 yards a game on the ground, and they were doing it, by spreading people out and creating creases and gashing them. And they weren't doing it by, bringing in, bunching everything up within 12 yards of the football on the line of scrimmage and just trying to, move people in a scrum. So that I don't get why you get away from what's, I understand short yardage is different, but if you spread the defense out, they're going to get out there and guard you, and you're going to have, roughly the same looks that you're typically dealing with. So that just getting out of character, I guess, Hubbard, and I know you've talked about it, is what I find the most head scratching. I really didn't have a problem with the 4th down, the strategy of the 4th down call in the 3rd quarter. I know hindsight makes it look bad, but it was totally in keeping with Heupel's nature. I mean, for him to go for it there, to try and change momentum, it was not out of character for him. I mean, he wasn't, reaching like we see some opponents do sometimes. I think when they clearly, make calls like that they're just trying to respond to Tennessee's offense. I mean, that is Josh Heupel to go for it there. Hated the call, hated the execution, but I didn't think that was just out of hand to go for it, up 20-17 from your own 47 there in the 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Eric, if you're going to keep doing that, and that's your nature and that's what you're going to do, you've got enough evidence to show you can't just line up and hammer it at people. So you've got to be more creative. I'm not really sure what that call was. It was a shovel pass look. I went back and watched. Princeton Fant scored on a Utah pass for a 2-point conversion against Alabama a year ago. So I went back to look to see if it was the exact same play. And they pulled a guard. The tight end's coming behind. But in the play against Alabama in Knoxville, Hooker caught it and sort of stood still and flipped it. He didn't run into the coverage a little bit. This has got Joe running into a turn loose free defensive end. I'm not sure what they were. I'm not sure it was executed the way it was drawn. I'm not saying it was a complete bust. Maybe Alabama guessed right. I don't know. But I don't, if that was supposed to be a Utah pass or a shovel pass, I don't know how the quarterback's supposed to throw that with the defensive end on top of him as fast as he is on that play. It just, the more I looked at it, the more I got, well, okay, they weren't running straight zone read here. They weren't running straight dive. They were running something creative. It just didn't have a chance based on what they ran themselves into there.
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody was wrong, obviously, or somebody didn't execute. I mean, that's a given. Because the whole going to that free man off the line of scrimmage essentially didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So, yeah, I don't know. You got to get creative because, again, I completely agree. 4th and 1, 4th and 2, just, taking the football and handing it straight up the middle. I mean, that's not working. So you got to, I'm not a coach. I mean, I don't have an answer. You got to find a way to be more creative in those situations because it's just not there right now.
Well, and that's the challenge for this team moving forward. Okay, as you flush this thing and move forward, it's not that you just flush it and you walk away and like, okay, it's all out of our system, it's out of our mind. And Josh Heupel talked about this on Monday. It's how you grow from it. It's how you improve on things that you didn't handle the right way, whether that's a locker room halftime speech and adjustment to play calls to personnel use. I mean, you have to grow from every experience, and that's the challenge for this team. Don't spend the week talking about officiating. Don't spend the week rehashing every play. Look at it, deal with it, learn from it, grow from it, and improve. And that's the challenge for this program as they get ready for Kentucky.
So Tennessee will get ready for Kentucky this week. Head to Lexington for a Saturday night kickoff, 7 o'clock. And this is a Kentucky team that's got a pretty it's got its stout defense. Numbers-wise, it's technically improved offensively, though it's got, to this point, a pretty underwhelming quarterback play. But what they do have that's really, really good is a running game, and Ray Davis, formerly of Vanderbilt, coming over via the transfer portal, replacing Chris Rodriguez Jr., and he's done a really, really good job. Josh Heupel spoke on the challenges of trying to stop Ray Davis and how important it will be to try to stop his momentum in order to win the football game.
Well, you got to stop them early at the line of scrimmage. But their offensive line, their tight ends, they're extremely physical. They do a really good job getting a hat on a hat. We got to be violent. We got to be disruptive. You got to have gap integrity between all their different personnel groupings, their shifts, their motions. We got to do a great job communicating and being, gapped out. And at the end of the day, when you meet the ball carrier, you got to do a great job of tackling them too. He's extremely physical.
Ray Davis right now second in the SEC. They just had a bye week, 781 rushing yards. He's first in the SEC with 13 total touchdowns, 8 on the ground, 5 through the air. He had 280 yards a couple weeks ago against Florida. He's a good player, and Tennessee will have their hands full trying to stop him. I would say, Austin, Devin Leary to this point has not been who he was at point in times at NC State, and Tennessee stops the run, forces the ball through the air a little bit. You'll have an opportunity to go and make some plays. 10 turnovers offensively, 7 interceptions from Leary.
Yeah, I would make Devin Leary beat you. Tennessee does a nice job. And honestly, they do a nice job stopping the run without having to load the box. And so, if they're able to do that, then it makes things much harder for Devin Leary. That's why I just think it's a tough matchup for Kentucky. Not to say they can't win this game, because they can. But, again, what they do well, Tennessee defensively normally does pretty well at stopping. So, Kentucky's not going to change, who they are. They're going to hand it to Ray Davis a bunch. The question is kind of like, how much do you corral him? How much do you eliminate his big plays? And then the other place I think you got to watch him too is Leary throwing swing passes or screen passes to Ray Davis as well.
Yeah, again, he's been a nice, receiver out of the backfield, if you will. I mentioned those 5 touchdowns on the season already. A place where they've improved is the line of scrimmage. Last year, that offensive line gave up, I want to say 42 sacks. That was 13th in the SEC. Only 11 sacks given up so far this year. So it's going to be a challenge for the defensive line to try to disrupt, the pocket, try to push the pocket a little bit. But again, Brent, the way Tennessee rotates defensive linemen, the way some of those defensive linemen has played, James Pierce, Barron, Easton, all those guys, it shouldn't be anything that they can't handle, but it's going to be a big point in the emphasis in the football game because, stat-wise, you went from an offensive line that had given up a ton of sacks in Alabama to one in Kentucky that really hasn't given up an awful lot.
Well, and you're coming off 2 very physical games, that now the rotation on the defensive line should help Tennessee, but typically teams the week after they play Alabama are not as physical. Look at A&M came to Knoxville after a disappointing loss, and they gave up more yards on the ground than they given up at any point in time in the year. Tennessee hit their average of what A&M was giving up in the first quarter. So clearly they weren't physical enough and weren't ready to go. Tennessee's got to match the physicality early, because I guarantee you Stoops is preaching that message to them about, hey, Tennessee's going to be beat up. We got a chance to win the line of scrimmage. Let's go get it. Here's the other thing too, Rob, that's going to be interesting in this matchup. Tennessee's beaten Stoops twice, and they've done it by chunk plays all over the place, right? I mean, I think they've got something like 7 touchdowns of 20-plus yards the last 2 matchups. And this is not an offense that's doing that right now. You got to drive the ball against Kentucky, which is a different type game that plays a little more into Kentucky's strategy of shortening the game out. But the game has gotten away from Kentucky the last couple of years because Tennessee's been able to big play them like crazy. How does Tennessee operate offensively with the idea that they can't big play the Wildcats as much as they have the last 2 years?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Hubbard, because that's not been this what this offense is good at. And Kentucky, not as dynamic defensively in terms of NFL talent that as they have been in the past couple of years either. But just like we all thought the Alabama game was going to be more of a under 30s, and it would have been under 30 if not for that late defensive touchdown. But I think this is going to be one too where the character is different, at least from Tennessee's standpoint, where it is more of a ground and pound. But I go back to what AP said, Hubbard. I mean, I don't expect Tennessee to big play to death, but I do think it's a good matchup for Tennessee in terms of Kentucky struggles really struggles to throw the ball in the air. Tennessee's been good at uglying things up for the opposing ground game. And, Devin Lee's last 3 games completed just 53% of his passes. And EC, I know you had the stat about only 11 sacks on the year, but 7 of those has come in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Against, against legit SEC defenses in Georgia and Missouri. So I just, in Kentucky's highlight of the year, they went for 300-plus yards on the ground against Florida. I don't see them being able to do that against Tennessee. Now, I think Tennessee will maybe have trouble scoring points too, but I like AP said originally, I like the matchup for Tennessee just on the face of it.
Yeah, I mean, context is key. Start off 5-0, wins over Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, at Vanderbilt, and then that Florida game you referenced. Last 2 games out, lost to Missouri by double scores at home, and got drilled on the road at Georgia. So we'll break down this matchup, Tennessee-Kentucky, as the week goes on. Snap and clear mentality for Tennessee this week. You got to flip the page, turn the page, leave Alabama and Tuscaloosa, and go on and win this football game before you come back home for UConn, and then, of course, a couple more big-time SEC games. So we'll preview it all as the week goes on here at Volquest.com. For Eric Kane, that's me. For Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, and Austin Price, I appreciate you guys for being here and listening to us on the Exterior Home Solutions Volquest podcast. We'll be back on Thursday for the Mailbag podcast. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.